Okay, so continuing into open session at 7:04. Do I hear a motion?
The motion that we go back into open session.
Sarah, second by? Second by Steve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the time is 7:05. Comments from the public pertaining to closed session items. We don't have any public comments,
No decision.
and so there's no decision made at the closed session. A recording of this meeting is being made and shall be kept for 30 days as public record. Pledge of allegiance led by Superintendent.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Nancy, Carol Robinson, Jim Bender, Mario Gutierrez, and we don't have the students here. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Second by
I'll second.
Bender, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, report and communication. We have, Ms. Gaines on the fitness article. And
Yes, thank you. This is Sanchez. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce two wonderful ladies from FICMAC, Tammy Epierre and Robbie Montalbano. Thank you. Who are going to give us a FICMAC report for Southern Kern. So ladies, all yours.
Do I need to use it? Yes? Okay. Okay. All right. Is it okay if I remove the mask, or are we leaving masks on? Whatever you guys are. I think it sounds like your distance. I'm distancing. Okay. All right. So FICMAT, just to let you know who we are, we're an independent governmental agency. We're statewide. And so we are not your independent auditor that comes to see you once a year. So we like to start off by just making sure everyone is aware of that and no confusion about that. And we are here because of the eligibility for this wonderful tool called the Fiscal Health Risk Analysis, which hopefully you have a copy of. It should be in your packet. And these became a part of our world in the 2018-19 Budget Act. And there is a thing called automatic engagement. That's what we call it. And it's something that happens free of charge to the district and free of charge for the County Office of Education. So this report that you're receiving tonight was funded by the state and at no cost. There are certain conditions where this study becomes available, and it talks about it a little bit on page 5 of the report. But in your circumstance, it was because of your negative interim certification. So because of that, you became eligible for this free service, and that's what we're here to talk about. Inside the report, it has 20 different areas that we analyzed as a team. And these are areas that over the last 30 years or so of FICMAT's existence, districts that experience different types of issues with regards to fiscal solvency, these are the most common areas where these types of things occur. And so what I wanted to point out to you on page 9, let's see, I don't know or not, but it gives a score breakdown by section as part of our analysis. And so tonight for our brief report, what we're going to do is talk to you a little bit about the top 5 areas where your numbers are the highest. So the risk number total is at 51.9%, which is a high risk area in that zone. And so what we thought we would do is just cover the top 5 so that you could see, the lower the number is a lower risk area. So for example, the independent audit report is under 1%, so that's really not an area of concern. So the areas over 4% are the areas we're going to talk about, and those are budget development, budget monitoring, collective bargaining, enrollment and attendance, and leadership and stability. And so I'm going to start by talking about those first 2 sections, budget development and budget monitoring. And those can be seen on, we're going to start on page 10 if you're looking in the report. So one of the first concerns for budget development is, and you'll see if you look at the report, if the district if you can answer, it's a bunch of questions and answers. So if we can answer a yes, there's no narrative. That means the district has satisfactorily completed this task. So for example, on the 1.2, it just says, has the audit report been completed and presented to the board within the statutory timeline? So we go back and we look at your minutes and we look at when your audit was prepared to present to you, and we can mark yes. But if there's a no, and we can't say yes, then we have a narrative that explains what our findings were and why we weren't able to give you a yes. That is the format for the entire report. It's very straightforward. It's not like a lot of our other reports where it's a lot of words and on and on and on and on. This is just question and answer all the way through. So our concerns in the budget development section were related to assumptions. So when we talk about assumptions, this is as board members, how do you know, or even stakeholders, how do you know what assumptions are being used? What COLA is being used to build the budget? What numbers are you using for staff reductions, or maybe you're adding a classroom somewhere? You need to have all of these things outlined for you so you know what assumptions were used in building the budget. We didn't see evidence of that as presented in your packets that came to you, and also as just part of the budget planning process. We didn't see that. So that would be one of the areas of concern. And it's important for everyone to know, again, but how do you know what kind of budget you're voting on as a board if you don't really know what all of the facets were taken into account? So that was one of the areas. Another one is this notion of, and this is talked about in 2.2, the bottom of page 10, called a rollover budget. So it's basically where you take last year's budget and you roll it into the next year. But we all know a year like this year would be perfect example of that. Not every year is carbon copy the same as the year before. And so it's always better to try to start your budget development process should be, kind of starting a little bit more from scratch rather than, not totally from scratch, but with something to acknowledge the fact that every year isn't the same year over year. And so that is what we call trying to avoid a rollover method for your budgets. And also, in the budget development process, it should include input from all sources. So we talked to quite a few staff members as we were conducting our interviews, and a board member as well. And we didn't find that there was a lot of input being given into the budget development process from other folks at the district. And so for a really well-rounded budget development process, all stakeholders and board members and anyone parent organizations, anyone that wants to have input in the budget should be afforded that opportunity. And so we didn't see any evidence of that either. And then 2 other things in this section that were of importance. One is just the budget calendar so that you as a board know when things are coming to you. And oftentimes it goes into a little bit more detail too in this staff in your business office, who's doing what due date would it be done by, and all of that. So for our budgets are we have the cycle that runs, you have your budget in your first interim and your second interim. And so knowing what all needs to be done in each of those timeframes and who's responsible for what with due dates. It's just a tracking thing, but also for you as a board to know when is something coming before me that I should be aware of. So that's one of the other things. And lastly, this could be a board policy or maybe administrative regulation or something, but a policy or something that tells the district when they're going to go out for a new grant or some sort of restricted fund. So when I say that, it has strings attached. You know that you're going to have to carry out a certain task as a condition of receiving these funds, that you have everyone sign off on, so that means business and curriculum instruction and the superintendent's office, everyone gets a chance to see this grant before a grant application just doesn't get rushed out the door. So sometimes we see this happen, and if there is an obligation for in-kind or certain things that the district must provide and the business office didn't know about it, I'm not saying that's happened here. We just want to see that there's a policy in place that covers the district to say, okay, everyone has seen this and everyone agrees we can be obligated to perform this task without costing the district money or whatever other things can happen when we get ahead of ourselves sometimes on that. Again, no evidence that's happened, but it's best to have a policy in place for that. And that wraps up the budget development section. There's just a couple of things in budget monitoring. This starts at the end of page 11 and goes into page 12. And when we look at budget monitoring, what I mean is knowing that I want to use something like a credit card spending limit. So if you have a limit that's in there for $20,000 and that's your budget for the year, you're only going to spend this. We found some instances in your budget where either spending was higher than your budget amount was, or when revenues were actually higher than the spending, than the budget was planned to be. And so we want to always make sure that your spending or your revenues are aligned with what you think is going to happen by the end of the year. And I mention this because our report here is based on the second interim report. And so that happens about halfway, about 50% through the year. So let's just pretend it's your power bill. If we got in to look at in budget monitoring and we said, oh, okay, we have $100,000 in here and the budget is showing actuals spent at 90,000, but we still have half of the year left, we know that that's not going to be enough. What we saw was that, and I'm just using power bill, but that's not the right field, but let's just say, to give an example, use that example, if the budget was 100,000, we were seeing where they'd already spent 120,000 or something like that for the year. Just throwing random numbers out and random, I'm just trying to explain a concept. So better tracking of the budget monitoring would be good as well. That was an area of improvement that we saw. And along those lines, there is nothing in your accounting system that tells the accounting department when they've reached that threshold of spending over the limit. A lot of places will put a hard stop in there, or maybe a supervisor has to insert a password or something so that we are truly acknowledging that we're going to go over on this, or maybe we're not going to go over on it, we're going to go do budget revision to make sure that there's enough funds. So that was another area of improvement in the budget monitoring section. So I'm going to hand it off to Robbie now, and she's going to talk about collective bargaining and enrollment and attendance.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I actually am soft-spoken, so I'm glad you have a microphone. Thanks for having us. Talking a little bit about collective bargaining, which is at the bottom of page 13 if you're following along, and on to page 14. I know Tammy mentioned this was automatic engagement earlier, so some of the things I talk about maybe from a period of time that's in the past. We took a snapshot. We were working with that period of time, and you can see in here some of the questions say for current year or prior 2 years. So that was current year at that time, prior 2 years. So I just wanted to give that context relative to collective bargaining and enrollment and attendance. I think the biggest challenge under collective bargaining was just the absence of documentation. So when if we can't get documentation, not because it wasn't forthcoming, but if they find it from previous times or whatever, then we can't really get a yes. It's not really an NA, it's a no. And so we tried to explain through here where there were areas where, like we know you've had some turnover and maybe it was difficult to lay your hands on something. But the big theme through here would be that using this as a guideline and a tool going forward that the board is seeing the cost of settlements prior to making decisions about implementing them. I'm sure they're talked about with your bargaining units during negotiations, but that is fully disclosed to you as a board before you're asked to make a decision to approve or ratify a contract. So that's probably the biggest takeaway. So if you've seen those in the past, we just couldn't find any evidence on your board agendas or anything that showed, hey, we did a public disclosure or we talked about the cost of an impending settlement that we've all agreed to before the final vote. So those are big pieces that you want to look at. It'll help you in your overall budget monitoring. I know that Jamie's going to talk later on about some of the great strides you've made, but this is a big piece because you want to make sure you know what you're approving and getting into over a multi-year period. Having said that, we looked at on page 14, I put a little chart there that showed what COLA is and what your settlements are. There's no rule that says you can't settle for more than COLA or less than COLA or anything. It's a measurement. We see districts who traditionally get into fiscal trouble. We find more often than not that they're settling for higher than COLA, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's an automatic. But it is something that, as you're presented with the settlement information and the cost and the effect on the multi-year budget, you can also look at, is this in line with COLA? In line with COLA may not be appropriate either, but to have all that information, as Cammie mentioned in the beginning, these are the things we see the most often when you hear that name school district in the paper or something that are having fiscal issues and distress. Any questions on that before okay. So on page 17 is enrollment and attendance. If you're following along, and I think it goes on to the following page. And really here, the takeaway is going forward that attendance and accounting for the types of students you have really is the cornerstone for your revenue calculation. So it's driving how much money you think you have to spend. So if that's not being monitored, analyzed, and verified, then you're opening yourselves to risk of maybe under or over projecting what you think you might have to spend. That's the biggest takeaway. I noticed in the audit reports that great improvements in getting closer to a better handle on the student groups, the unduplicated count as they call them, so it's great. But those are those pieces of knowing, hey, are we declining? Well, declining 1 year doesn't mean you have a trend of declining. Who's looking at that? Are your attendance rates keeping up? If you've traditionally had kids come to school 96% of the days, this is all pre-COVID, mind you, are they still coming 96% of the days? Or have you lost kids that are falling off, or has it gotten better? Those types of questions. And so that's all something that in various departments of the district, they can be looking at to make sure that then when those revenue calculations are done to see, well, how much money are we going to have in 21, 22? Well, you've got to look at that first. So any questions on that? That's the big takeaway from the enrollment and attendance. Thank you.
So on the leadership and stability, most of that score is primarily rated based on just the turnover that you've had. You've had a new CBO and a new superintendent based on the timing for this. I think it's in the prior 1 or 2 years or something like that. And so there is nothing you can really do about that. And other things in that category include board policies. We commend you on updating your board policies. It looks like you've done a fantastic job with that. But sometimes when we interviewed staff, we were finding that they weren't always aware of if there was a board policy that was updated, it wasn't being communicated back to the staff. So that would be one of the areas in the leadership department. And speaking of that, I wanted to, before I turn it over to anyone else for questions, I wanted to specifically thank Superintendent Gaines for all of her effort and getting us, she's been amazing to work with through this process. There's so much information that we asked for coming into this, and she went above and beyond to make sure that we had everything that we needed to make this report happen. So I wanted to thank her here tonight as well. So are there any questions that you have for us?
Can you give us an overview of, first of all, when I was reading it, it said it was the 17-18 school year that you were looking at?
18-19, no, I'm sorry, 19-20. It was last year, second interim report that you had presented to you most likely in March of this year, right when COVID was happening, that second interim report. So we're like Robbie was explaining, it's a snapshot in time based on what was presented in that second interim report in March of 2020.
And so are we going to get a list of, dumbed down list of, we need to make these improvements?
Actually feel like that's what Jamie's going to do.
No way.
In his presentation, he's going to follow us here and talk about, there's a list of things that he's going to be talking you through. So I think you'll see that there. He summed up everything that was in here actually very nicely in a list of tasks that will help get you on the way to more yeses in this report than nos.
The areas that you saw for 17-18 would be those specific questions that span where I said, current year and the 2 prior years. So throughout the report, if you saw 17-18 listed, it was that type of question, like how have you been doing over the last few years? So that
We've been changing a lot.
Yes, and it shows.
Yeah.
It shows that you've been doing
Okay, thank you both. Thank you both. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jamie Henderson, who is our consultant from Kern County and our finance, accountability, administrative consultant, and I'm happy and proud to say he's also my mentor, so.
Are you in trouble? Thank you, Barbara. It's really interesting, probably, I don't know, in the past year, I can't remember at what point, but Barbara and I had a conversation. And Barbara walked into a tough situation, okay? And we were kind of talking about that, and I said, you know what, I'm kind of an analogy guy, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But she liked it. And the analogy I used was Southern Kern was a battleship. And through some unfortunate practices, the ship was not kept in good shape. The hull was stressed. A lot of the equipment on the ship was not working. It wasn't seaworthy. It wasn't ready to go back out. And some things had to happen, drastic things. And there was a year of cuts and looking for every penny we could find. I was talking with Jim earlier that we remember those board meetings that were packed and what do you mean we don't have money and all the things we were going through. Well, you came through and you got the battleship back to where it could go back out and sail. However, it would have been nice to go out into calm waters, but COVID-19 in the economy would have no part of that. So you were hitting rough seas right away. Now, normally when a ship goes through repairs and it goes back out, they go on what they call a shakedown cruise, okay? And there is a checklist that has to be gone through to really make the ship in the best shape it possibly can be. This was your shakedown cruise. Okay? They generated, as Carol asked, a list, so to speak. And they do a great job. They are outstanding. I used FICMAT a couple of times when I was superintendent on, I had them do an MOT audit for me, which was absolutely outstanding. So they have put together a great report. Our office received it as well. We went through it. And when I say we went through it, I went through it, Jeff Payne went through it, Priscilla Quinn went through it, Mary Barlow went through it, John Mindeborough went through it, all 5 of us. And we felt that we needed to send a letter to you, which you will get tomorrow. Yolanda as the president, Barbara as the superintendent will get this letter, but you'll all receive copies and copies will be made available to the public. We did an in-depth look at their report and we made comments. And you guys have seen the letter and they concurred with what we were doing. And also in this letter, Barbara has made contact with Mary Barlow asking for our assistance, and we're more than happy to do it. So Dr. Barlow has asked me to kind of be your fiscal advisor. They're going to assign a gentleman named Dennis Franey. Dennis happened to be my assistant super business for about 8 of my 12 years as superintendent, does an excellent job. Jeff Payne, Steve Mattern, others. And we want to assist you in going back through this, developing that list, kind of getting the timeline, and looking at the things that need to be done. So that's what's on the horizon. Now, let me share just a few things. And actually, I have copies if you want to pass those out. Gary, just pass them down until everybody gets them. Should be enough for everybody. You guys might have to share one. Jim, you can certainly have one. You don't need it.
If you don't,
Thought I did. I tried to. Yeah, you got about a 10-minute challenge.
run out of paper.
Yeah, I do. Okay, one of the conversations we've had in our office, in fact, it was Dr. Barlow, Dr. Mindeborough, and myself, was talking about Southern Kern and what we've seen over the last couple of years. And I kind of put together, based upon our experiences out here, based upon FICMAT's report, and based upon our letter that you will receive tomorrow. And so I kind of looked at the past. You know, in the second half of fiscal year 17-18, we found you to be insolvent, and you had a choice to make. You could be taken over by the state, or you could have KCSOS come out and assist you, and you agreed to that, and you struck an agreement with KCSOS, which also allowed you to borrow $3.4 million. So we entered into that agreement. I was assigned as your fiscal advisor with the stay and rescind that I had, and a fiscal expert, that would be Jeff, was assigned to you, Jeff Payne. And right away we found that you guys were going to have to make reductions to the tune of about $2.8 million. Now, as you all know, a budget, and I think your budget was at about 90% salary and benefits. So where is 90% of that $2.8 million coming from? Painful personnel cuts. And so cuts had to be made, and they were made. Then all of your expenditures had to be approved by KCSOS. For 2 straight years, we saw every single, myself and Jeff Payne, saw every single purchase order, every batch that you did. And we had to review it and then let you know if we were approving it or if there were things that needed to be changed. I've got to tell you that Talia Bishop is worth her weight in gold, okay? She was outstanding to work with, as were, you know, Leanne, Barbara, Jonathan, you know, it's been great. Sally, you know, I call up Sally and I go, Sally, what's this? What's going on? Where am I? Okay, yeah, it's this. Okay, thanks. I don't know. I think she knows everything. I really do. She's a wealth of knowledge. So,
She's not allowed to retire.
oh yeah, that's automatic. Oh yeah, you're right. So anyway, we spent 2 years doing that, and you guys have come a long way. So if we look at the present, you're going to have, we project an ending fund balance of 1.3 million or 3.5%. You've realized an additional LCFF revenue amount of 2.5 million. You have monitored spending and not added new positions. That doesn't mean that more monitoring and checks and balances don't need to happen, as FICMAT reported out. They do, they really do. So remember, you're in your shakedown cruise. Now we're going to start fine tuning and doing those things to really make the district in the best possible shape from a fiscal standpoint it can be. You've repaid the 3.4 million to KCL SOS. All this in 2 years. That's pretty stinking good. So you finished your agreement with KCSOS. So good news is you don't have to deal with me anymore. Okay? So what's the future look like? Well, we would ask that you seek assistance and training from KCSOS fiscal and management staff. And don't limit it to that. CASBO, FICMAT, AXA, others have trainings that might be of value as well. Okay? You are going to have to implement further controls to monitor the budget and spending. You need to utilize best practices to monitor enrollment and its impact. Your situation, my observation of your situation is that you are starting to have some declining enrollment, and I think you guys probably picked up on that. But you're in a unique situation out here. You have people that are here because of the base, so it's a fluid population a little bit at times as well, okay? And I don't know that there are any new home starts or that many going on in this area, which would generate students. Are there some starting to come in? Okay, that's great to hear. I was not aware of that. And we can talk about that. I don't know if you use any kind of a generation factor. We used to, in my district, we had a CFE, and when we first started looking and monitoring the homes, we were getting about 0.62 students per new home, and within about 10 years, it dropped down to about 0.41. But that's the area where I was. That may not apply here, but there's ways that we can figure some of that out. You need to develop practices and policies for a healthy fund reserve. That was one of the things we, from the get-go, talked to you about. You had no reserve. That's why you had to borrow the money. Okay? One of the reasons why you had to borrow the money. There were other reasons as well. And then right out of the FICMAT report, I've added, didn't add, but I included, review and consider any studies, reports, evaluations, or audits that contain evidence the district is demonstrating fiscal distress and recommend possible solutions. Conduct a study of the business office and human resources operations and provide recommendations to roles and responsibilities and procedures. Okay, I think that's really important to do. Sometimes we can get into a habit. We've done it this way for years and years and years. Okay, is that the best way you can do it? So those things need to be looked at. And the reason why I bring this up, and I call this the future, is because if you address these things going forward, we don't return to the past. And I don't think you want to do that. And I don't think you would. But we have to be vigilant in what we're doing, and we have to be purposeful in the things ahead of us. So don't know if you have any questions of me, but that's all I got to say. So, anything? Questions from FICMAT? Anything at all? Okay.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you. We're not going to be rude. They have a great way to travel. I have some ways to travel, so we are going to bid you a great evening and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Next, we have the RTA report.
I'll step up over here if you don't mind. And Mr. Wexler, you can tell me as long as that gets picked up, I'm fine. I think on the back of this report, though, you didn't see that it says to get Mr. and Mrs. Coleman to retire. That would certainly help your fiscal outlook as well. That's as well as that went over. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I appreciate the board's understanding with the number of letters and emails you received from teachers over the last 2 weeks. I did not incite this outpouring of opinion. After the last board meeting, I immediately began getting emails from teachers with serious concerns about the return of in-person instruction. A common theme was, what can we do? My response was to let the board and superintendent know the other side of the story. You heard several emails from parents about the need for students to return to class. You also needed to hear there are dozens of issues involved with the decision you made. I hope each and every one of the board members took the time to read the letters and emails. I know Mrs. Gaines did because I saw her responses to the teachers. I appreciate her taking the time I know she does not have. Believe me, I feel her pain. Barbara, I greatly appreciate your effort and commitment. In reading the concerns sent by teachers, you saw the same thing over and over again. There were dozens of questions of the protocols and procedures that would be put into place or that would be in place the moment students walked onto a campus. I even saw one letter, I believe, that had 43 numbered questions. This goes to the heart of the objections I raised at the last meeting. Well, I'm very pleased that tonight's board packet has the SKUSD Guide for Reopening Safety Plan. I know this is a draft, and I've also learned that the district administration has spent untold hours developing the guide. Had RTA seen or known of the existence of the plan over the last month, teachers could have been somewhat reassured, and there would have been fewer questions brought to the board and to the superintendent. But again, I'm glad to see we have a comprehensive document. 10 days ago, RTA submitted a proposed addendum to the board-approved MOU for the reopening of schools. The provisions of the addendum are to take into account in-person instruction. Many of the expectations in the addendum are related to the district's safety plan. As of right now, however, RTA has not received a response to the proposed addendum. Once we have a response, we will be able to enter into negotiations. Because of the need for negotiations, the portions of the safety plan that still need implementation, the extensive task of placing students in 2 equal instructional groups by class and by class period, along with additional distance learning group and model, RTA recommends the board approve dates that are on the safety plan. January 11th for Gen Ed students and November 2nd for students with special needs. This is item 7B on your agenda tonight. I had a very good meeting with Mrs. Gaines last Friday. We talked at length about the schedule for in-person instruction and the model for in-person instruction with distance learning. Mrs. Taylor was also part of the meeting to explore the requirements for students with special needs, having the opportunity to begin on-site classes. The RTA Executive Board reviewed each of these at our regular meeting just yesterday. The RTA Executive Board supports the schedule on the district's safety plan for the return dates of November 2nd for special needs students and January 11th for Gen Ed students. I would, however, like the opportunity to speak on item 7C, the instruction plan for a blended model, when that agenda item comes up on the board, comes up in the regular agenda. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a tumultuous past 2 weeks for all of us. These are not only critical issues, they are emotional issues. I found some of the Facebook posts about my conduct at the last meeting to be interesting. I found the supporting emails I received from teachers, parents, and even students to be inspiring. Dr. Robinson, President Sanchez, I know I was out of order at the last meeting. I said it more than once during the discussion. I fully understand Robert's Rule of Order. I've also witnessed this board and past boards to allow staff members and community members to make comments during board discussion. In our district, I feel this is beneficial. If the board president at any time asks me to refrain, I will follow the instructions. But if any board asks me for my input, they are allowing me to be part of the discussion. Please ask. I am grateful that this board wants the input of teachers and the experience I have to help guide your decisions. Thank you for your continued support of the staff and the students of Southern Kern. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. CSCA report. This is from Gary Jones. It says, hello, Board of Trustees. Our CSCA board has been working on an MOU with the district regarding the reopening of the schools. It has had some back and forth moments, but in the end, both sides have come to an agreement and are ready to sign on. You should be seeing this on your agenda sometime soon. Recently, CSCA has been informed about the Paraeducator Conference. Typically, this conference is held in Sacramento during school days, so it is difficult for our employees to get to the conference. The next one is held on March 2021. It's going to be a virtual conference. This means that potentially all of our paraeducators can attend. We reached out to Mrs. Gaines and Mr. Barth, and they graciously agreed that we could pay for our paras to attend the conference. This is a wonderful opportunity for skill training and gaining great information regarding their challenging and ever important job. We would like to express our appreciation and gratitude to the district for helping us with this. Our paras are excited to be able to attend this year. This is a great example of morale boosting and equitable acts of our classified employee desire. It shows that our district does care about every staff member, regardless of their job. In the past, it hasn't been often that we were offered such great opportunities. I am happy to see this turnaround in our district and hope to be able to see more of this in the future. We are eager to see how the board votes on the district reopening plan tonight. Thank you to everyone involved in keeping our schools functional during this wild time. Many of us, from administrators to support staff, have been working straight since our initial shutdown and doing everything they can to ensure that our students return to campus. Everyone will be kept safe. A big shout out to everyone involved in planning and prepping for our return. Thanks, Gary Jones. Okay, CBO report.
Thank you. Good evening. I've included in front of each of you tonight a packet of information that much of which is fairly hot off the press, as it were, having come out today from the county office and from school services. This is the guidance information that we receive as we develop each of the budgets during the annual budget cycle, we receive updated versions of this, starting with the adopted budget and moving through first interim, second interim, third interim, and a 45-day revision if necessary. From the county office, the first document, and you can see that there's common themes through them. These organizations work closely together, but they don't always flow in unison. They don't always agree with each other. School Services of California is usually pretty explicit about when and why they differ from others, and so they tend to be an important source of information to monitor and weigh against our county. Our county values their opinion highly, and they often speak to us on our monthly meetings directly. And they have not yet released their financial projection dartboard, but that should be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And it'll be interesting to see, since it is coming out after the common message this time, because the common message comes out from the County Superintendents Association, so it's fairly consistent across the state. School Services coming out after them. There's data charts in the current common message that School Services is typically the leader in putting out. So things like COLA and information like that. So it'll be interesting to see how closely they align as we move forward over the next couple of weeks, moving into the process of budget development. Thanks.
Good evening. Been busy over in Ed Services. Not too much to report, but we have been busy. Our math academies are going well. Lots of students, especially at our elementaries. I think middle school and high school have been a little bit slow getting started, but elementaries are certainly going strong. And when I was out there last week, the kids were very excited to be there. Teachers were excited to be there, and parents were happy to be dropping their students off for just a little bit of help for a couple of hours. Our English learners have been coming in to complete their initial testing, so I believe that they got their last student in today, so I think they have completed that. It has been certainly, a busy start to the school year. Always, something happening. But I do want to, make sure that everybody knows how much we, thank everybody that is working so hard to make sure that, schools are ready to go. The teachers are working really hard. Have had, spoken to a lot of parents in the last couple of weeks. They, understand that, what it's difficult for them. It's difficult for the teachers. So, you just have to give each other some grace and just keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Superintendent's report?
Good evening and welcome to everyone this evening. I first want to acknowledge and thank the Board of Trustees, all 5 of you. You went out on a 4.5-hour tour of all of the campuses and to really assess our preparedness for returning to school in a blended model. And I really appreciate your patience, and I thought your feedback, and you were very insightful. And I learned a lot from all 5 of you on things that we knew we need to do. Although you saw many great things, we still have room for improvement. So we want to constantly strive to improve for the best for our kids in Southern Kern. So I want to thank all 5 of you for giving up 4.5 hours, and it was starting to get kind of hot there in the bus. And I also want to thank Art, who was our bus driver. He did an amazing job, and you can tell he's well prepared to have kids again on his bus. So that was awesome to see. I also want to thank Gary Jones and Felicity LaRue. Gary is our CSEA president, and Felicity is an administrator at Roseman Elementary. They have worked really hard in starting the Google document that is bifurcating all of our students in Southern Kern into 2 cohorts, cohort A and cohort B. And I noticed that one thing I'm learning about Gary is Gary can create a Google Doc based on just, he really is into that. And so this is the second time he's really come forward and helped us in our goal to return to school by creating, him and Felicity, this plan. So thank you so much to them. I also wanted to say that Kern County informed us that there was a company that donated 70,000 face masks to the districts in Kern County that we were going to share. So I thought I'd not be greedy, and I only asked for 3,500 of them. Today, when they returned from bringing back the 3,500 face masks, they gave us 40,000. So they gave us 40,000 of the 70,000. I'm not sure what the other 46 districts are going to, what share they're going to get. But so that just goes to add to our already insurmountable amount of PPE that we have acquired and getting prepared to return. So I wanted to thank Kern County for that donation as well. And I also want to mention that on Tuesday, when we did our bus tour, we were not able to visit Abe Lincoln and Rare Earth because they were having WASP. And Cabinet and I had an opportunity to meet the WASP team that was evaluating the 2 schools, and I think it went quite well. We don't have an answer yet, obviously, but I felt that they liked what they saw at both of the schools, and especially they were very positive about the fact that we had just ordered new computers for the rare earth students. They were very excited about that. And also that they had moved to the Acellus program. So they were very, very positive about that as well. And I have a few questions for us. So I want to say to Mr. Torres and his teachers at Abe Lincoln and Rare Earth, I wish them the very best. I'm very optimistic that they will get a WASP accreditation moving forward. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bain. Next, we have the board member communication. Start with Mr. Bain.
Yeah, we had a good time on our trip, our field trip, I guess we call it. It was a good time. I really enjoyed it. Seen some good things happening out there, and also we've seen some. We need some improvements too. So we talked about it, and I think we got a good plan. And I'm feeling confident that we'll get back to school here as soon as we can and get things going safely for everybody.
Thank you. Mario?
I also want to say that the tour that we took on Monday showed that we are really close to being prepared. There are a lot of areas where we need to change up a little bit. Other than that, I mean, we're close. There's still some improvement that needs to be done, but I was impressed that as much that has gotten done that needed to be taken care of. So we have a good start on it. Other than that, thank you.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes, it was a really enjoyable time, long for me, but it was nice to see some of the things that Ms. Gaines has been telling us we're ready to go, and then to go there and see them in place and to experience it. It was reassuring to know we're working on that. With anything new, of course, you're going to have adjustments to be made along the way. And so we know that we'll have to make changes as we go, but nobody's done this before. So I feel confident that our district is one of the best prepared districts in California. And I'm very proud of the work that everyone has done.
I'd like to do that as well. I just want to thank all the administrators and the staff at each school, from the custodians keeping the campus clean and prepared and ready to go, with improvements as well. But I am excited about everybody working together and trying to do their best to have a safe, clean campus for our students and parents as we try to have an opening date to start school again. I just want to say thank you to our administrators at the district office as well, because they've been working really hard on preparing as well. Thank you.
I too would like to mention the site visits. I was a little leery when they were advertised as a tour, because I think everybody knew what I had in mind. But we got a no kidding systemic view. We looked at the system. We did what if it to death to stress it, to see where we could fail, how we could improve. Some campuses are a little more on track than others, but everybody is on track. Everybody has a direction to go, and I think they can make small course corrections, and we'll be totally prepared. So I do think that, and we even used tour tonight, and I cringed a little bit. It was more than a tour, folks. We actually looked at the system. I also want to thank the community and staff for all their comments, inputs, and suggestions, especially the few that were constructive and actually added to the solution. I especially want to thank those folks and keep them coming in, because some people have some good ideas and that are actually constructive and could help be a part of the solution versus a barrier to the solution. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Comments from the public, we have a couple of them that need to be read. We'll start with you this time.
Okay, the first public comment is from Siobhan Slavic. And that's Slavic?
Mhm.
Okay. I would like to point out to the board that in my granddaughter's case, she is receiving 2 hours of direct instruction per week in each subject at Tropical Middle School via Zoom. When school is reopened under the blended model, she will continue to only, which is supposed to be emphasized, 2 hours of direct instruction per week in each class, albeit in person. There is no increase in classroom instruction time. My only purpose in mentioning this is to state the obvious. And one additional obvious comment, there has been a new custodian hired at $14.88 per hour. McDonald's currently has a sign up in their drive-thru stating they hire at $15 per hour. Just food or thought as negotiations take place. Signed, grandparent of a student at Tropical Middle School.
I have one from Jody Feinstein. To Sally, I just wanted everyone to hear from a teacher that RES custodial staff are amazing and working so very hard to keep us safe and clean. They are constantly on the move, and I want everyone to know how much they are appreciated. Jody Feinstein.
Thank you, Jody. This one is from Diane Greenberg. Dear school board members, I have already written you a 3.5-page letter signed by at least 17 employees from RHS and will not rehash those items. In tonight's meeting, I don't think the discussion should center around what is the fastest path to reopening. I think it should be about how to ensure a safe and effective reopening. In looking around Kern County, we are seeing schools reopen for on-campus instruction. However, they are doing a phased reopening and have been transparent with their reopening plans. I think everyone agrees that Zoom is not a perfect system of instruction. However, let's remember why we are in this situation in the first place. There is, after all, a pandemic going on right now. There are risks that are involved in going back to campus. When considering reopening our campuses again for in-person instruction, please consider the timeline that is needed that we can accomplish this as safely as possible. Do realize that if a teacher or student gets infected, those they come in contact with will have to quarantine. If you have 3 teachers get infected at the high school, for example, you could have to quarantine 300 to 450 people and end up with a school closure on your hands because half a campus is quarantined. I think it is wise to phase in cohorts because 1, you are bringing in first those who have experienced the highest learning loss, and 2, you will be able to better mitigate the issues that crop up once the students are on campus. If you have a smaller group of students on campus, it might be easier to fix issues. I am honestly not pushing for a particular date to reopen. I just want us to reopen as safely as possible with a longer timeline. The hope would be that the district takes concrete steps to make sure both employees and students are safe on campus. We've had since spring break to make our campuses safer, yet very few steps have been taken to make our campuses safer. My hope is that our district will finally take real measures to make campuses safe. Please, when considering the plan to reopen, include training for all staff members on safety protocols and the expectations put on all levels of staff to maintain a safe environment. Please provide clear information to students and families about the expectations for students and families to help keep everyone safe as well. On another point, if technology is also part of this plan, please provide training and ongoing support for whatever new technology is being put in place. Thank you for your time and consideration. Diane Greenberg, RHS teacher.
Okay, so next on the agenda is the consent items A through L. I have a correction on the letter F. It should not read PTA, it should read ASD. For the record.
The explanation was done by ALC.
It was by ASD.
Which
Letter
I was gonna ask that, because the two did not coincide with each
F.
other.
Yeah, with the Blitz Hair Studio.
Yeah.
Do I have any questions on consent items A through L?
I had one on J. The contract showed, is she on an hourly basis per student?
That's a salary.
Yeah, for the, she's a psychologist, correct?
I didn't see it very much.
What's that?
Wasn't that the year contract?
Well, it didn't, I wasn't sure, that's why I'm asking. Most of the time I can decipher, but.
It says that Heather Jordan, if you look on page 105, it has the agreement contract cover sheet. It says that she will conduct an IEE to emulate the psycho educational assessments conducted by Southern Kern Unified School District. Which is compared to this agreement with a second opinion. This service is for one student.
What's the, for the
One
year?
student?
Well,
That's what the test costs.
Is that what the test costs?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That was the only question that
it looks like it's a second opinion. It's like a second opinion or so.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like that.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we accept the A through L with the correction.
Second by. All in favor? Aye. Okay, approved graduation and promotion dates, Ms. Gaines.
Yes, met with the site administrators, and one of the things that we discussed was graduation and promotion dates for, first of all, Roseman High School, Rare Earth, Abe Lincoln, and then a promotion date for Tropico Middle School. And these are the dates that they wanted and felt would also provide the board opportunity to attend all and not have an overlap of having to bounce from one to the other. So they're just here so that we can release them, put them on our new web page, our new website, and make sure that everybody's aware.
Is there a motion?
Make a motion that we accept the dates.
Here, second by
Second.
Robinson, all in favor? Aye. Okay, revised notice of intent to reopen in-person instruction for plans.
Ms. Gaines?
Yes, since our last board meeting, I want to give the Board of Trustees an update. At the time of our last board meeting, I presented to you the parent survey, which at that time that the board meeting, we had received comments from 1,010 parents. And of that number, 70.5% of them had expressed a desire to return to either blended or actually return to a traditional model school. Since then, and in lieu of some things that have transpired, we have asked our parents again to come forward and inform us how many of them would like to keep their children on a distance learning model. And I want to say that our parents have been very, very gracious and very forthcoming with the information. Many of them really would like to return their children to school, but yet they have a fear that maybe they have an elder parent in their home, or they just have a fear that it is still not safe for their children to return to school. So over the past week, the Ed Services Department, Anna in there has done Anna Arias has done a phenomenal job collecting all the data from the parents and the forms that the parents have filled out. We are up to around 850 students whose parents, and to be honest, even though we asked them to turn them in by Friday, we're still collecting them daily. It has tapered off, but we have over 850 parents who have said that I just cannot send my child back to school at this time. And although I know that the board signed up a resolution last time giving me the authority, I always like to let you know what is in my mind. At this time, I would like to return our special needs students on November 2nd and return all the rest of our students on January 11th to a blended model, the model that you chose, AB, distance, AB. And I just would like the board to re-vote on this.
Now, I guess I'll make a motion to open it up for discussion. If we go to, at this point, I can see that we are not ready to open on the 27th like we have planned. If we bring in our special needs students, because they are the ones that need the most instruction, bring them in first. And then maybe bring in another group of kids that are struggling with math, English, whatever it is that they're struggling with. Bring them in a little bit later, and then basically kind of a tier type. Is that what we're kind of thinking?
We definitely could consider something like that. Mr. Gutierrez, right now I have my Math Academy kids already coming after school. And so far that is, it's very structured, and it's working out really, really well for the kids whose parents choose to have them attend the Math Academy. It's strictly by choice. But I want to see how it goes for our special needs students, and if we feel that that we can bring then in maybe perhaps some of our English learners and our most at-risk students that could once we set the date to bring in our special needs students, then we can at any time after that bring in additional students. But I'm thinking probably the best plan in order to give everyone to to resolve a few issues that we did still see at our sites that we need to, as you mentioned, a couple of little things yet that we know we can improve on between now, just given a little more time. I think that with everybody concerned, one of the things parents shared with me, some of them, is that some of the parents are even going out of town and will not be here. And so they really kind of look for, to keep their children on distance learning for a couple of weeks there. And other parents said that if we create they like my cohort plan, and perhaps after they see if it works out, that they might, after a couple weeks or so, start sending their children back to school, because they know they would have a seat in cohort B, which I'll talk about under item C. But I think right now, to keep it pretty straight, special needs students November 2nd, continue with the Math Academy, and reopen with the blended model, everybody, January 11th.
So what I'm hearing is the plan that you just stated is something that the staff is behind.
The staff,
The staff is behind those dates.
Let's ask
From
Jim.
what we heard earlier, the staff is behind those dates.
Jim's gonna speak when we get to item C.
We're just talking dates right now.
Yeah, we're just talking dates.
From what I heard earlier in the comments, the staff is behind the 2 November and 11 Jan as well.
I think that's what Queen said. I mean, her.
I believe that is so. I mean, from what I've heard, that they are behind the, we cannot just stay out forever.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We had to, the initial request was 2 weeks ago, I believe Mr. Twellman mentioned January, why not January 11th? As many of the so-called districts around us were coming back on January 11th. I believe this is the absolute short anything happening in the state, or with COVID, a spike, a major spike, where the governor steps in. I believe January 11th would be the latest we could still do our distance learning, and then come in with a blended model.
So my comment about this is that we get little bits and pieces, but Mrs. Gaines is getting information. She's dealing with all these parents, and she's talking to the superintendent, other superintendents, and the county, and she gets updated so much more often. So I feel comfortable with her being able to have the freedom to make these decisions, because she just has more information than we do. Although I do appreciate you wanting to keep us apprised of what's going on.
I respect it, letting her have that decision too, but I also want to know all the facts. I believe visiting the school sites open up our eyes, open mine a lot more. And we may be out of order or whatever, but I would like to hear one more time from RTA that it sounds like a good plan for the 11th, 12th, 11th.
I've not put out a formal survey, so I can't give you data. If the board wants that, I would provide it. My intuition, based on all of the information that I've gotten from teachers, is that they would feel a lot more comfortable with the district's preparedness with a return of most of the students on January 11th. And as I reported to the board in my discussion with the RTA executive board yesterday, which are the elected officers and elected building reps, there's about 20 of them. That was their preference, and that's what they would endorse in terms of the dates to return. November 2nd for our special needs cohorts, and then January 11th for all of the other schools. Anything in between, Mr. Gutierrez, all these items, all of these models can be discussed and considered. And the teachers have a lot of good ideas about what may or may not work. And we can certainly continue those discussions. But I think in general, those are the two groups, those are the two dates with those groups returning that a majority of the certificated staff, the RTA unit members, which is all the teachers and the school counselors, they would be behind that, yes. They would feel a lot more comfortable with the district's preparedness. And again, the document that's in the board packet that Mrs. Gaines and the district administration has prepared shows a tremendous amount of preparedness physically that you guys saw on your, not tour, Mr. Tansley, you gave a different name. But then there's still a number of issues. For instance, Mrs. Lopari at Roseman High School, the lead counselor there, said, just logistically readjusting student schedules at a high school using the Aries student management system is almost impossible in the middle of a semester, but at the semester makes it much more possible to do. So those, the physical things the district has done, putting it on paper, has been outstanding. I'm glad we've gotten to see that now. Now it's tying up all those other loose ends with student instruction and those things. So yes, those dates, the certificated staff is definitely much more behind than what we talked about previously with October 27th.
So I have one other concern, and that is the kindergarten, the really young students. I don't see that their needs are being addressed. And it's not in the plan anywhere. So I just want to bring it up that the really young students, this is the beginning of their school career, I guess, and to miss out on that foundational learning that is going to be a problem for their whole future.
Do you want me to? Yes. As you've heard me mention, I think before Dr. Robinson, we were given a prioritized list of how we should, if we're going to do cohorts and phase back in, which groups of students that we should, and I presented that to you in the order that we have been asked to follow that along. I'm sure there may be districts out there that are going to do their own sort of version, and
Yeah, some districts are phasing in by grade level. They're, starting with kindergarten and then doing that and then adding in a grade, and they're kind of phasing in
I'm
that.
kind of a rule follower, so I'll
Yeah.
just say that I try to follow what the advice of Dr. Mary Barlow and Kern County, and also the health department, and so that's what we're trying to do. But I certainly understand what you're saying, and we want to get them back in school as soon as we can.
Okay.
So do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we go ahead and revise our opening dates and allow Ms. Gaines to do the scheduling as needed for the reopening.
Okay, and second by
Second.
Sandra, all in favor? Aye. Okay, instruction plan for blended,
I would still like to revisit the school sites again before that opening date too. One more time.
Yeah, sometime maybe around December, we should
With the new board members.
Yeah, once the new board members are seated and all that, and then we'll revisit besides sometime. I think we need to do it sometime in December, even if we're on break, we need to be.
I think before we go on a holiday break is the best time for us, because if it's not, we need to see it all. We need to see it very, very structured and everything in place by that time for sure.
So we'll visit that again in November. One of the meetings, we'll set up a date after the elections and all that.
Only if you come into my room this time and watch the
You were
match.
busy.
That's the whole point.
I was worried I was gonna have to do 48 hours notice, Jim. That's not bad.
Everyone's welcome into my room.
I'm trying to stick to the contract, my man.
You're not there, it's no problem.
Okay, instruction plan for blended model in-person and distant learning schools. Ms. Gaines?
I'll go first, Mr. Quillman, and then you can rebuttal. So I had this come to mind actually at 4 a.m. because we have to remember when we are creating a model, it has to be, we really need to strive to meet the needs and accommodate for every student in Southern Kern. And there are students out there whose parents are, they have the right to be a little fearful at this time. We are in a pandemic. We're spiking. Some states are spiking again. And so we don't actually know what the future holds. And so at 4 a.m. A week or so ago, I had this idea because I was struggling on, I was shocked at the number of parents who wanted their children to remain on distance learning. I did not see it as reaching 850 and above at that time. So this kind of threw my mind into a shambles. So I came up with keeping to your AB distance, AB. I'm going to just try to explain this very simply. If you have a class of 30 students, whether you're at elementary, middle, or high school, just take a class, one class, where there might be 30 students. And on cohort A, let's say out of that 30, 25 of them are requesting to return to school. But you have 5 out of the 30 that parents want them to remain on distance learning. We have to take every student in Southern Kern and place them on using a hybrid model. They all have to have a place. It's like they have to have a place value. So they're either in cohort A or cohort B. And so what I did to reduce the pressure on the teachers and to reduce the amount of work, I decided that on cohort A, we will put the first 15, any 15 of the 30 students who have requested to be back in school in person. So on Mondays and Thursdays, cohort A, the teachers would not have to do any additional Zoom. They would place work on Google Classroom for cohort B students, but the actual explicit direct instruction, which is the best any child can get anywhere. That's the best, instruction you want to give is when the teacher is delivering explicit direct instruction. That's what's best. And so on cohort A, those 15 kids will get live instruction in front of the teacher on Mondays and Thursdays. And then for cohort B, you would take the remaining 10 kids who want to be in school, and they would have a seat on B day, cohort B day, which would be Tuesday and Friday. And also the 5 students whose parents want them to be in distance learning still, the teacher would have to then turn on the camera and turn on the Zoom, and those kids would have to, follow along with the teacher on B, Tuesdays and Fridays. The great thing about this plan is if 2 weeks into it, I'm going to use you, Mario, Mario decides to send his child back to school, the child is on cohort B, they still have a seat because the 5 seats for those students are empty. We're not going to put other students in there. Those seats are empty because those kids are on a cohort and they could come back at any given moment and really not interrupt the program or the plan. And of course, on Wednesday, that's the distance learning for all the students. So they're all on the same playing field for that day. I believe it will work. I'm running to Leanne at I don't know what time in the morning. Really running. You gotta hear this, I think I got it. And, you know, we really kind of tried to think of all the goods and the bads. We just approved $900,000 for a Promethean board that makes that work even so simple that we're gonna have PD for the teachers, I believe in December, coming up for both the high school and Tropico and also for the elementary teachers. So, I mean, there's things in place that will even help that. But this way, all children, the biggest concern, and I want you to keep this in mind, and I even had somebody go to, over my head to Kern County, is parents do not want to lose their teachers. And I believe it was a Quellman parent, I'm gonna say it, Jim, I'm fighting my case, you can fight yours. I believe it was a Quellman parent who went over my head to Kern County and said, because it was an algebra student at Tropico, so must be his, why do I have to lose my teacher because I don't want my child back in school yet? I want them to stay home. You know, so there are children out there that have issues, there's parents who have issues, and so they have that right. But our job as a school district is to accommodate for every single child. And so I believe this is a good plan and it will work if I can get the support of the teachers. Like, it's an informational item for you this evening.
Right, it's not. Okay, Jim, if you want to speak on it?
Yeah, I'd asked to speak on this particular item. I believe it's a good starting point. I fully understand where Mrs. Gaines is coming from. We've, just in our executive board, we've talked about it that much. Other teachers have read the plan or did see it in the board agenda and read through it. So I've gotten some input from them. I would like it to be a starting point. I would like to rely on the expertise of 170 teachers who've been doing this for 3 months in the spring and 3 months now in the fall. As to what variations might address all the needs and concerns of the parents, the district, and most importantly, the student instruction. There's some inherent issues with it. I didn't want to bring in the discussion about Promethean boards because I have some information about them. I've done some research and gotten some input from people who use them. And I think they'll be an interesting addition to our instructional program, but it's not going to be the magic pill.
Still got to teach.
Yeah, but it offers some interesting ways to incorporate everything that we do. It's funny because as we add all of this technology, we're tremendously limiting the ability of a teacher ever being out of the classroom. Because if a sub's in there, they can't deal with any of the technology. They don't have the login information and literally they can't teach a class because it's so technology intensive. But like I say, I see where Mrs. Gaines is going with this. I agree with a lot of what she's talking about there. And I do. I think it's a real good starting point, but I'd like to, now that we have this time between now and January 11th, more realistically, December 1, because we definitely need to know where we're going by that time. and just get some things finalized. I see the possibilities, but I'd like to also get the, input from, again, 170 teachers, and maybe somebody out there has the better idea none of us have thought about. But I really appreciate the board's direction and Mrs. Gaines' approach and idea here, because we are so much closer than we were 2 weeks ago. Oh my goodness. We've taken leaps and bounds, both with how we're gonna bring students back, but then also how we're gonna provide them with the instruction. So yeah, I just want everybody to understand, we feel that there's some issues that need to be addressed here, and it's a starting point, not the end point. But by December 1, maybe we can find what that end point is. Thank you.
Okay, business and operations. Mr. Burke.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to simply do a quick informational item here this evening. There is no backup, other than the comments that I'm making here. If that's what you're looking for, I didn't want to have you looking too long. Several years ago, the board was presented with something called a policy, but it was never really treated as a policy. It was never included in board policy on Gammon Online or anything. It was more of a protocol and procedure to be implemented internally between HR and business services. And the item addressed all staff in some ways, but primarily it was really focusing on classified, unrepresented staff. And I think that's the most critical component of it. For represented, as in CSEA, classified staff, we have a collective bargaining agreement. For the most part, we follow it, though we need to bring some leave time practices in alignment so that we're treating all of the covered unit members equivalently. This is, specifically I'm speaking to vacation time. When we look at certificated staff does not earn vacation time. They're not entitled to it under Ed Code or Labor Code, and so we're not worrying about them. We're worried about classified staff, specifically a very small subset of them, the unrepresented staff. So confidential staff here at the district office and management staff at the district office who are classified. The policy lists the district's approved holidays. It listed the covered positions. Those are out of date. We need to update those. So I'll be bringing this back to you, and just wanted to give you sort of a heads up here tonight about what we're doing. It's a lot of clerical work for the most part. And when we look at the FICMAT report tonight, one of the items that we were criticized for was the fact that the district has not been consistent in managing down or buying down leave time from staff. And it's a matter of opinion. I happen to agree with the opinion that we should be managing it down. If you let my vacation time accrue over the life of a career, it accrues at a higher rate every year because if my salary increases. And so by the time I retire and then say, oh, by the way, I want you to pay for this time, it's much more expensive for you to do it that way. And we need to do it on an ongoing basis. And also it's better for staff. Vacation time exists for a reason. We want staff to take it off. It's a good way to check and see how things are working. It's a good time to buy, a breather for staff and help their performance. And so we're gonna look at all of that and bring this back with corrected list of holidays, because holidays for classified staff are in Ed Code, which we want to make sure we comply with that. And we're going to revise some dates in here as well for how many days employees can accumulate, how many days the district will buy down annually, and make a plan that we will comply with and treat all employees uniformly. When this was originally brought to you, it was supposed to come back to you annually, and it never did. And so my proposal would be that we bring it to you, have you look at it, get buy-off on it, and then we would not bring it back to you unless there was an operational problem with it. we would want to implement it. So it would be an ongoing procedure of the district until such time as we felt it needed to be changed, statute changed, it warranted us bringing it back, or there was some operational obstacle to making it happen in a reasonable way. And so we could have that conversation probably at the next board meeting and overcome, another point where we can start to overcome some of the criticisms of the FICMAT report, certainly, but also overcome a challenge that we've had operationally just in treating people equivalently. So I appreciate your time, and we'll start sending out information through Friday letter and things like that on how we're going to develop revising this for you forward.
Thank you. Personnel items. Approve the following as personnel items. Ms. Gaines?
Yes, basically, as you can see, we've had a few employees resign, and this just pretty much outlines for our classified, our certificated, and some extra duty stipends that we have put in place. And as you can see, we did hire one custodian that we lost a while back, and Mr. Bender just, I'm sure you're gonna ask me, so I'm gonna head off your question. Just teasing you, Mr. Bender. Anyway, we really were in dire need to replace. This is someone we lost, I think it was sometime last year, and never replaced this position. And finally, Raleigh and Quinn just said we really need to replace that position. And so,
Is he full-time? He gets 40 hours?
yes,
Does he get vacation time too?
I would imagine so.
Sick time?
Yes.
Holiday pay?
Yes.
Just some food for thought.
Yes. And we also, we had, I believe, 7 applicants for this one position, and a couple of them were CSOs. And so, but the person, and I wasn't on the panel, so I really don't know this gentleman, but 4 of the candidates who applied, we also have been using them as subs and giving them work as subs. Well, we have a few of our custodians who are out right now. We had a custodian injured, and he and his wife are both out, and we have a couple other people out on leave. So we are trying to put using our subs, and they've been very helpful. And also our CSOs, many of them have stepped up during this time of not having any kids on campus. They're also helping work out of their job classification. So I really appreciate the CSOs who have stepped up as well. So it's pretty self-explanatory, the personnel schedule.
Motion to accept the personnel.
Second.
Bender, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sure.
And before I ask the adjournment, anybody have any questions?
Yeah, let's back up a little bit. You guys flew past me here. I got some stuff I want to talk about on the pay vouchers and stuff here. I noticed also we had a second quote on the board. Did we compare the two? I mean, we've got $100 and some $1,000 difference. We compare the two, and it's the one we're choosing is that much better.
It really was that much better. I mean, we saw 4. The one we're buying is, I believe, the best out of all of them. And was really leaning that way because of our professional development. We get 10 days of professional development free from the company, and they're quite flexible on how that's going to be delivered for the teachers' time that teachers can be available for this. But it's the board, the Promethean, I forget Dan will have to tell me, what's the material it's made of?
Oh, the glass, like Gorilla
No,
Glass?
this model.
Oh, this is the titanium.
The
compared to the nickel.
titanium is the top of their line, and we have one-time learning loss funding to provide this caliber of an educational tool for our students, because it's really an engagement tool that the teachers, once they see everything it can do, they're going to love it. I can promise you that. And so are the students. So I think was the best choice, considering the programs that it has built into it that are free. That was one of the deciding factors that, for me anyway.
Today we had a customer in there. In fact, he was an old board member that works over Palmdale School District. And he's been using it for me for work for a couple of years. And he says he loves it. He says that is just the thought to be able to do different stuff on it. The one thing he did say is, do not get I can't remember what he used. There's 2 programming systems on it.
Yeah, Windows and Android.
Yeah. I think he said that the Windows is the one that worked the best. Because the other one had very limited things that you could do with it. The one thing that he didn't like about the Android one is you had to take a snapshot of something before you could draw or do out like a math problem or something. Where the other one, it's interactive. You can do it while you change everything at the exact same time. So.
And the price that they paid for theirs a few years ago was $8,800 a piece, just for the board itself. So the price has dropped in half. So as technology comes out, you see that decrease in price. But
I know we're just buying a lot of them, so it's a lot of money.
it is a
The
lot
price of one
because,
doesn't seem too bad, but
yes,
we're spending $800,000. I want to make sure we're doing something right. I've never seen that much money in my life.
It's a special one-time grant.
I understand that, but I don't want to just spend it because we got money.
no. And Mr. Bender, it's, that fund, there's 3 sources of funding. 2 of them have to be spent, 2 of the big ones have to be spent by December 30th. And so, and it's very restricted, even though it's one-time money it's basically to mitigate learning loss in students. And so, this is why we felt that this is going to be in every classroom, in the libraries. I mean, every school will have one in their library. We will have one in the boardroom for presentations moving forward. And so we felt that this was, one of the best ways that we could spend that money, including the laptop and monitor that all the teachers are getting. And because some of the equipment that the teachers are asked to work with is 5-6 years old. So that too will benefit the kids in their learning.
Couple more questions. I always pronounce it wrong. It's Detsco, our food provider. We got them down here for $51.95 for signs. Usually they provide all their signs for us in the past. Why do we have to pay them $51? I know they say COVID-19 signs, but they provide all their signage in the past free of charge.
Josh, do you want to address
And I'm
that?
sorry, you're speaking about the food service program, Sodexo? I missed the first part of what you
The
said.
signs
The signage,
we're paying.
Okay.
$5,100 for signs for them. I know it's in our school, but usually all the signage in the past, they paid for themselves.
So they are not responsible for the COVID-related expenses. That's outside the scope of their agreement. They do and they still do provide more sort of internal marketing signs to make the cafeteria more appealing to indicate where what food items are and things like that.
But on this, did they bill us for the signs? Or are we reimbursing them for,
They billed us for the signs.
they billed us?
They initially, Mr. Bender, excuse me, John, I'm gonna jump in here a second. They initially gave us a little over $1,000 worth of free signs. Raven was able to get those for us, but it did not, they were very nice, but it did not, that $1,000 worth of signs could not stretch to 6 campuses. So we then, out of learning loss funding, went in and COVID-19 funding, and we wanted more of those great signs. And so we ordered
Those were like the ones for the seats and
all that,
all that stuff.
that you saw a lot of them in
Lot of
RES.
And then we got 2 areas here.
Yes.
Chromebooks for $53,000 and then student laptops for another $41,000. We've been spending a lot of money on Chromebooks and laptops this year. It seems like, I mean, 200,000 not too long ago, I thought.
We remember, Mr. Bender, we were at one time a district that was 1-to-1 from 4th grade through 12th grade. We are now a district that is 1-to-1 from TK all the way to 12th grade. So that, in adding those additional devices, that does have a cost factor. Also, one of the things that, equity, we've talked about equity. And so one of the things that was very important to me was in talking to Mr. Torres, Abe Lincoln is going to get a couple of Promethean boards to use in their independent study program, but Rare Earth was not, because those students are on a CELUS. So what we found was to help that program and to help those students, we wanted to do something for them too, because they too are suffering learning loss. And so we bought 90 new computers for those students so they can access a CELUS much, much better. And that was one of the things that was highlighted and very much appreciated by the WASP visiting team.
All our students right now physically have laptops. We need an additional 200 plus whatever amount these are. Right now, all the students are out of school with laptops. Every student that's in our district has laptops, right?
Are those, I'm
So are
going to
these ones
refer
that-
this,
The 200, I think that's a bill from the 200 that we received
That
from
we already,
yeah.
okay,
KCSOS.
this isn't new stuff.
Yeah.
This is stuff we already have.
Those are from the spring.
Okay,
The 90 Chromebooks, currently the Rare Earth students have the old RHS student laptops. So we're replacing those. Currently the Rare Earth students have 5-year-old laptops.
okay.
So we're replacing those with new Chromebooks.
So, yeah, and if we can fund that with learning loss, that will pay dividends in the future with our IT refresh plan, because then we're using learning loss dollars to pay for that stuff versus general fund dollars or whatever funding we're
And that's what we are.
So it's gonna help us in the long run, taking advantage of this 3.4, even if we could back up that 200.
Yeah. Those 200, they went to the 2nd grade. That's our 1-to-1 laptops for the 2nd grade.
Okay. One more item, sorry. Dishwashers, $35,000 and then $14,000 to install them? Now, can I get a visual of this? Because I've got a restaurant, I bought a dishwasher, $3,400. It's industrial, it's in every restaurant around. What are we doing? Is it the washing station? Is it every table that's in there? Because you could Google it, any commercial dishwasher, and this is way out of price. I installed mine in about 20 minutes.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to let Jonathan answer this question because I've heard for several months now that Roseman High School and Tropical Middle School, the staff at these two schools have been basically, there's just been no dishwasher working there. And I knew that the dishwashers were gonna be somewhat expensive. It was shocking to me how much the installation, I was thinking, wow, this is an incredible amount of money for the installation. So I'm gonna let Jonathan talk about that.
So this has been an issue, ongoing issue for over 2 years. The food service fund did not have money, as we've talked in the meeting before. You know, Superintendent Gaines and I have joked about the $2,500 ending fund balance in that fund, and now it's over 400,000. So as we reinvested the program, we solicited again 3 new quotes for installation and for product. We solicited installation quotes from Hobart and sales quotes from separate companies, because Hobart does not sell directly to the district, to proprietors. We had 3 competitive quotes. We selected the best one that there was. We do have a price increase at the high school because we require gas for the hot water heating, because the electrical load there would be too high if we used an electrical system installed. At the middle school, we will have an electrical system, so that system is slightly cheaper. The quotes have been consistent over the 2 years. We have not always looked to the same vendors, so we've moved around a little bit, but we have not seen much movement on the prices that we've been given. So they seemed reasonable and
Is it just
fair.
the machine itself, or is it the tables and everything that lines up to the machines?
It is the machine itself.
Does that have anything to do with DHA and
I think they all have to be DSA approved units. They're different than commercial units.
And then the prevailing rate, wage rate is what we pay versus.
Yes.
So that's astronomically higher, when you're looking at that.
Did we ask Raleigh now if they can install them?
Yes, Raleigh was involved in the ordering and the
If our
development.
maintenance department is able to install them?
No,
They're not?
no, we need to have them installed.
Did we purchase these already?
For new.
J&E, they're in Bakersfield, I believe, right?
Correct.
They would be purchased, the requisition would go through tomorrow pending board approval.
I can't approve that until I know what I'm approving. I already did. Can I void my vote on that because?
We already adjourned, so you can't. Yes, ask those questions when we get there.
I mean, I've got a brand new one sitting in the trailer I'll donate you. I mean, that's a lot of money. And I don't understand what it is. I mean, I believe you guys got quotes, but sometimes I believe these places just take advantage of school districts. I mean, that just seems, unless it's something completely different than I've never seen in there before, but, which it might be, it could be.
Yeah, and I have a feeling they're quite large because when we were visiting Tropico on Monday, thank you for correcting me, Mr. Tanksley. The days get lost in the days. But when I mentioned to the cafeteria manager that your finally got some quotes for your dishwasher, I mean, she was just like so grateful to hear that, because you can imagine for a couple years now what they've been going through.
Yeah.
So I would imagine they're pretty elaborate and pretty, sturdy items for that price. But I too was a little surprised at the cost, but they're commercial grade and probably have to be, approved for school installation and all of that.
They have to be, anything having to do with schools have to go through a different grading process. It's, honestly, it's ridiculous. I have to deal with that in my business. A really good example is
Come back up.
you can buy them all day long on the other side of over in Arizona for less than a quarter of what we have to pay for here in California. And according to the state, they have to go through a certain testing. to be approved. And a lot of companies, the only way they're gonna do it is they gotta pay for that testing, and that cost goes right back over to the customer. And I'm sure that appliances go through the exact same thing. I know the building portion of it, when they do the building, they're way overbuilt. I mean, you could get away with so much less when you're building commercial than what they do with schools. Sometimes I look at some of the stuff that I've watched all our schools being built, and I was in construction before I got into the automotive side. And I look at some of the way they're building stuff, and it's like, boy, is that overkill. That is way, this thing it's designed to withstand any kind of earthquake, hurricane, everything. That's why a lot of times during disasters, the place where everybody is supposed to go is at the schools. Because when everything else is down around it, the school is still standing.
Can I zoom in on our fancy screen and I'll show you about 6 of them under $4,000?
School approved.
Okay,
That's
that's just my comment. We already
I
approved
can
it.
send out, the specs if you want to buy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just go to the school and check that one out.
When
I'd like to see what it looks like,
Yeah.
because that must be a huge one.
it must be, and I'm not sure. We can send you the information on that. Would you like that?
Could you do that
Yeah.
on the
what
one
we
that we're
have.
actually
I
buying?
can email the specs to the board if that's your pleasure, yeah.
I'd like to
absolutely.
see that.
Well, you never have to clean dishes for 800 people at a time, but.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah, pretty close, yeah.
Quite a bit.
Okay, are we all done? I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second by Bender, all in favor?
Aye.
At 9:01.
Mr. Bender, it's pricing.